Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I thought I'd make a bit of a backstory of how I got into racing and where I started, how I progressed up the ranks up to where I am now, and basically just go over a little bit of basically explaining my racing career. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into it. So our story begins in 2010, 15 years ago, crazy to think that now, but I had been a supporter of F1 since about 2009 when Jenson Button obviously won the championship with Brawn GP. I really loved that car and really loved that sort of story and that feel-good underdog story. So I already fell in love with F1 before that. But my racing actually began on the F1 2010 game, which was where I kind of started to enjoy racing myself and wanted to try and get into it myself. So I started a little career mode on the F1 2010 game, and it was actually quite funny actually, because obviously at the time I would have been about 8-9 years old, so I wasn't very old at that point, but I really enjoyed racing in that series. And it was actually at the Spanish Grand Prix round on that career mode series where I actually got my first win in the Williams. So yeah, I really fell in love with the sport at that point and really enjoyed racing, even though it was only on a sim, and at the time I couldn't even afford a steering wheel, so I had to use the Xbox 360 controller. Even though it was on the Xbox 360 controller, it still helped with my racecraft a little bit, obviously keeping it clean and tidy, obviously worrying about exits and entry speed, and obviously also about overtaking and fighting other cars. So yeah, obviously at 8 years old, that was quite an experience and I really enjoyed it. And it was around about this time as well where I started doing a little bit of rental karting up at St Evans Karting in Cornwall. And that was amazing fun as well. It was only in like a little junior kart and obviously a 4-stroke little engine. But nevertheless, it was still great fun and I really enjoyed the feeling of actually being in the race and in the karts myself rather than obviously behind a TV screen. Then we cut to 2014 where I kind of wanted to advance a little bit and didn't really want to just do the odd arrive and drive rental karting sessions anymore, and I wanted to actually compete properly. So we looked around, me and my dad, and we found a series called Autograss Racing. We did look at karting, like getting our own kart, but unfortunately, as we know, karting is mega expensive for what it is. I mean, all of motorsport is expensive to be fair, but especially karting, if you want to be at top level in karting, you need to be paying thousands every weekend, which is just crazy money. So obviously, us trying to keep it on a budget, we did find an alternative series called Autograss Racing, which was basically a classic Mini or a Nissan Micra, and they also started adding in Toyota Yaris's as well. But nevertheless, it was one of them basically stripped out with a roll cage, and that was about it. Everything else for the car was stock. And I first started racing that in 2015, and obviously at this point I was only 12 years old, but nevertheless it was an incredible experience and incredible learning curve to actually be racing myself in a competitive environment. And I really learned a lot in that first year, as obviously only being 12 years old. But in reality, 12 years old is quite late to be starting racing. But like I said, we never really had the money, so it was kind of a struggle. And nevertheless, starting at 12 is still better than nothing. But yeah, first year, I really learned a lot. I had decent results. I kind of got a couple P4s. But bearing in mind that the grids were only cars of 8 per race. So, about midfield, which ain't too bad, I'll take that. And then we'll cut on to 2016, and this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So, obviously, from the experience of the previous year in 2015, my rookie year, 2016, I kind of wanted to do a little bit better and improve and start getting a bit more better results, maybe even a couple podiums. Unfortunately, the whole of 2016 was pretty much the exact same as 2015, until the penultimate round of that year, which actually, funny enough, happened to be on my birthday as well, where in the final I actually got an incredible start and
out to play. So Jordan Barlow doing what he's done all season, gating first into that first corner.
It was at this moment he knew he f***ed up.
it was a little bit bumpy here, as you can see from this video here, but nevertheless it was a good start and I managed to actually get myself up to P2. Unfortunately, the session was red flagged, which is a massive shame. And on the restart, I choked and finished P4 again, which was a massive shame to say the least. But nevertheless, then we cut on to the final round of the season. Again, the final as well, where I don't really know what happened. It just all came together and somehow I just found all this pace. And I managed to get a really good start once again, much cleaner, and actually get up to P2. And the guy that was actually leading that race, a guy called Jordan, and he was dominant all season and won pretty much all the races throughout that season and was already crowned the champion before that race had even begun. But I was actually following him and I kind of used that to my advantage and sort of tried to follow him to try and learn lines and try and learn what he was doing and why he was so dominant. To be fair, the car that he had, the Mini, he spent thousands on, literally thousands. So the budget difference between what I had compared to him, it was a massive difference. But nevertheless, I still fought him and I still wanted to learn where I can improve as a driver and improve what I can do with myself. And I definitely learned a lot. I kind of regret not trying to attack him a little bit more and try and overtake him rather than just sit behind him the whole race and learn from him. But nevertheless, we managed to finish P2, my first podium in autograss racing and in any racing whatsoever. So I was very happy with that and really enjoyed it, and obviously really wanted to go into the next year in 2017 as more of a championship contender. So 2017, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So as the rules state in the junior saloon category, which is what I was racing in, once you turn 16, you have to advance up to the Class 1 men's series. So as Jordan from the previous year, who had won the championship, had turned 16 in 2016, obviously in 2017, he had to move up to Class 1 men's. So that left a little bit more of a chance for everyone else to have a chance in the championship. So we went into the first round, again, P4, not too bad. I guess that keeps us P4 in the championship, which ain't too bad. Now I start fighting a little bit more, and I think throughout the whole season there was sort of a battle for the championship between 4 drivers. So number 1 was me, number 2 was a guy called Ryan, number 3 was a guy called Adam, and number 4 was a guy called Jamie. And Jamie was actually the brother of Jordan, who had won the championship the year before, who was also in a Mini. So me, Ryan and Adam were in Nissan Micras and Jamie was in a Mini. It was a massively interesting battle for the championship because it never was one driver constantly dominating. It was sort of a mixture. So even in the heats and the pre-final, you still got points. And then obviously in the final is where you're getting the most points. So in the next round, it actually ended up with me getting P3. It was Adam in first and Ryan in second. So I was hovering around 4th place still in the championship, but just behind Jamie. And that's sort of how it went throughout the whole year. It was sort of like back and forth, each other beating each other. And then we cut to the final round of the season, where I was actually running 3rd in the championship at this point, with Adam in first, Ryan in second, and Jamie in 4th. So it was still all open for anyone to win. It was a little bit out for me to win, because for me to win, I think it would have had to be Adam had to retire from pretty much all the races. So I was kind of out of it, but I was still mathematically in with a chance. But nevertheless, I still fought, and actually, funny enough, even though it was my first ever time in the wet in autograss racing, actually, to be fair, in the wet at all, I actually managed to finish P2 in the heats, which I was very happy with. I couldn't believe whatsoever. Unfortunately, Adam had won that one, so at that point, mathematically, I was out of the championship. But in the final, so to decide where you start on the grid, this is basically how the race starts. So you have basically a bungee line, and then it goes up, and then you go. So to decide what position you start on, whether you start on the outside, the middle, or the inside, you basically, it's a really fair one, there's no qualifying. It's basically little balls in a bag and they have numbers on. So post 1 to 8, 8 is on the outside, 1 is on the inside. If you pick out 8, you're on the furthest outside. If you pick out 1, you're on furthest on the inside. If you pick out like 4 or 5, you're pretty much in the middle. So yeah, it was a very interesting one because unfortunately I picked out number 7. I still remember this, I picked out number 7, so I was pretty much all the way on the outside. Jamie was on post 8, so he was even worse. I fought at this point, I fought even worse. And Ryan and Adam were actually on like post 2 and 3, I think it was. So they were on the inside, and I knew, okay, this is going to be a bit of a tricky one because they have the inside. But little did I know, there was actually so much grip on the outside. And I'll show you the start here. So as you can see, we pull away. and me and Jamie just get an absolute rocket of a start compared to everyone else. I don't know why there was so much grip on the outside, even though it had rained all day. And obviously I understand there is a wet line, but even on dirt track racing on the starting grid, obviously it's just wet everywhere. So I was surprised there was so much grip there, and me and Jamie got a really good start. And obviously because I just had the inside, I did manage to pip Jamie on through turn 1, and because of that I took the lead of the race. And I'm not gonna lie, I was absolutely panicking. My heart was racing. I was thinking, wow, is this gonna be my first ever win? Fortunately it didn't last long, because as you can see I got absolutely sent by Ryan and overtaken, and then a couple of laps later I got overtaken by Adam. So unfortunately I did finish P3, which is a massive shame to say the least, because I really feel like I could have won that race. And I still think back now to what I could have done differently to win that race. I mean, I had it all. I literally had the lead out of turn 1, and then into turn 2 I'd lost it. So it's just a massive shame. Inexperience obviously in the wet, and that's how it goes, unfortunately. But because of that result, I did actually finish 3rd in the championship, and I was really excited about that, and really happy that I had finished a top 3 in the championship, which is kind of what I wanted to aim to do to improve in 2017. So 2018 would have been actually my final year in the junior saloon class in autograss racing, and probably my final year in autograss racing altogether. Unfortunately 2018 never happened. Obviously at this point, turning 16 and also being in my final year at school, I had to concentrate for my GCSEs, which was a massive shame to say the least. So my parents sort of said, you know, you got to concentrate on your exams. You can't really be racing on the side as well, because you'd be more concentrated on that rather than your exams, which is a massive shame to say the least, because I really would have loved to have done that final year. But nevertheless, that's how it goes. So between, well, January till July, when I had my exam sort of period, obviously studying, and then obviously the exams in like May, June, unfortunately I didn't really do any racing. It was just completely dead. It was a dead year, to be fair. And then after I'd passed my exams at the end of July, that's when I sort of looked to get back into racing. At this point we'd already sold the autograss car, so that was a no-go, that was off the cards. So I decided to just step back and go back into rental karting, and this is where I started going regularly to Race World and doing a little bit there. And I really learned a lot from a lot of the marshals down there and a lot of the coaches down there, and also a lot more about circuit racing and obviously on tarmac rather than dirt. So yeah, I really enjoy karting once again. And it was also around about this point where I started to look to getting into competitive races again, but this time in karting. Obviously at this point I had a full-time job of my own, so that's what I kind of did. I saved up quite a bit, and in 2019 it was pretty much the same, where I was going Race World, I was going like Dunkerswell Raceway, a little bit of St Evans and stuff like that, even Castle Combe circuit, and I was doing karting around the country a little bit more in rentals. And then I decided to do a one-off round with Club 100 at Clay Pigeon Raceway, and that was very interesting because obviously that is a very competitive environment. Some of those drivers in there have got years of Rotax experience in the past, so I knew it was going to be a challenge. I tried my best. Unfortunately, again, it was raining all day that day on race day, and I had no experience of karting in the wet, so I really struggled. In the final it was dry, and I did actually manage to go from, I think it was like 21st up to P11, which I was very happy with. Fortunately, it didn't take that long to lose it all. So yeah, it wasn't the greatest race and the greatest race day of them all, but nevertheless, it is what it is. We tried our best. So in 2020, we all know what happened. We had that whole lockdown situation, and we couldn't really do anything, and I couldn't really do any racing. I got into sim racing a lot more during that time and started doing a lot more streaming, and really enjoyed doing that, to be fair. And it was around about July time where Peter and his dad Rick, they decided to step up from rental karting and actually purchase Peter his own kart. So thanks to Peter and Rick, he actually let me go out for a few practice sessions in his kart and really got my hands dirty in a proper racing Rotax kart, which was an incredible experience to say the least. I still can't believe to this day that I managed to do that sort of thing. And I really learned a lot during that time, and it was at this point where, thanks to Rick and Peter, obviously selling that kart that I was testing, they actually let me purchase it, and then they got another kart. And also massive thanks to them, because they also helped me with towing around the kart, mechanic in the kart, spare parts, which no way would I have been able to afford to kart in on my own without them. So massive shout out to them. I wouldn't have been where I am today without them. So yeah, nevertheless, so we started racing around about September 2021 in karts, and the first race, well, this is basically how it went. But you can only use wet maxi tyres, which I didn't have, sadly, on the day with me. But straight away, coming into turn 1, I knew it's definitely not weather for slicks, because I just went straight on here and just kept out the barrier, luckily. So I just straight away bailed out and dove into the pits, because I knew it wasn't worth me risking my kart and maybe even myself. So yeah, I just bailed out of that one, sadly. So yeah, it wasn't the greatest race known to man. Unfortunately, it did start raining, and at this point I was on a massively strict budget, and because I had only just purchased the kart about a month or two ago and obviously had to get it ready for racing, I couldn't actually afford to buy wet tyres. So unfortunately I had to go out on slicks. It didn't work. I backed out on the formation lap, and I missed pre-final as well because of that, which is a massive shame. But as you saw, the final thankfully was dry, so I did manage to go out for the final and get some nice battles and overtakes done, and I think I finished P12 on that one out of 15 or 16 or so in. So it wasn't too bad, and I did enjoy that race day. And during the whole of 2022, it was pretty much the same, doing race by race, getting more experience, trying to get my hands a bit more dirty with obviously the mechanic side as well as obviously racing a proper racing kart. I had a lot of unlucky moments in karting, such as this. Now we're going to try and keep this position here. Someone actually spins just ahead of me. I try and go around the outside, and I actually go straight into the back rim, which... It wasn't an ideal situation to be in, obviously damaging the kart pretty much every race I did. Obviously a lot of spare parts went into my kart, which again wasn't ideal for the bank. But nevertheless, at the end of 2022, unfortunately it was getting a little bit silly, and I did have to sell my kart, which was a massive shame. And it was at this point where I thought I was completely done with racing, just because it was getting a little bit ridiculous with spending. So around about the end of 2022, after Finley actually saw I sold my kart, and he started telling me about trying to get into car racing, which car racing again is even more expensive, but you can do it on a budget where you can make it a little bit more cheaper than karting if you know the right people and obviously also do the right research. So he started telling me about the C1 Endurance Series, and actually showed me about a scholarship that I did with BPC at the beginning of 2023. So what I did is I got my ARDS racing license. I got that, and then I joined the BPC scholarship, which was an incredible experience to say the least. I really learned a lot from the coaches, obviously about circuit racing, which was at Blighton Park. Also, I did a lot of wet practice the day before, which was incredible to say the least. Unfortunately, we did come away without the scholarship, which was a massive shame, but nevertheless, we did keep pushing, and we did actually help BPC out with a little bit of mechanics on the side during the first few rounds, until they offered me a drive at Oulton Park and in the 24 Hours Silverstone for a very discounted price, because I obviously had helped them out the couple rounds before. So I ended up making my debut at Oulton Park in the C1 Endurance Series, which was an incredible learning curve and something that I still remember to this day. My first ever race in car racing on a proper circuit around Oulton Park as well. That's just mind-blowing. Obviously you hear about BTCC drivers going around there and stuff like that, and now you're racing around there. Even though it's only in a C1, it's still an incredible experience, and I really learned a lot, and obviously had a few little moments during the race, but nevertheless I really learned a lot and really enjoyed that one, so thank you to BBC. And the next one was the 24 Hour of Silverstone then in the C1 Endurance Series. Now this, honestly, still to this day, is probably one of the best races I've ever done, just because it was around the full Silverstone GP layout circuit. It was 24-hour long. Even though it was in a C1 series, it was just such an experience to understand what it's like, for example, like in the 24-hour Le Mans, to experience what the drivers go through. You kind of get the same feeling because you're tired, you're drained, you know, they're working hard, but they're still pushing. And it's an incredible experience to say the least. Honestly, I got a little bit of night practicing as well, and it's so weird to just, all you can see is exactly what's in front of you. You can't see the corners, you can't see the apex. You can see the other cars just behind you, but all you can see is just bright lights basically behind you. And it is an incredible experience to say the least. We did actually finish P28, I think it was, out of like 56 or something. So about midfield. After that, I kind of had already spent the entire racing budget, because even though it was at a discount, it was still sort of, you know, expensive, just like any racing is. And at this point, I sort of tried to look for little track days and little test sessions that I could do in cars to try and get more experience, obviously racing on a circuit, from proper professional coaches who have years of experience and championships behind them. For example, I did a day with Team Hard in the VW Cup car with Scott McKinnon. I did a day with Race Car Experiences in a Honda Civic Type R with Will Orton. I did a day with BBC once again in the Audi TT Cup car with Sid Smith. So yeah, I did a lot more days and a lot more coaching, because that's the thing with me. I always chase for improvement no matter what position I'm in, whether I'm doing well, whether I'm doing bad. I'll always try and look to do better. So obviously getting coaching from those professionals obviously really helped me. And in 2024, I managed to do a lot more overtime at work and get up a bigger budget to actually compete in the BRSCC Mazda MX-5 Clubman Series. So I did my first round at Snetterton. I'd never been around Snetterton before, and it was a very interesting experience. Obviously, I did the test day before because I don't have any experience around Snetterton, and I had no experience in an MX-5 as well. So I did the test day and really found a lot more pace. On the race day, I was very scruffy, let's just say that, with the gear changing, with the braking. Obviously, my first time in a rear-wheel drive car. Also, it was my first time having to heel-toe braking, so it was a very scruffy weekend. But I still learned a lot from that weekend, and next round was actually the next month in May, and that was at Alton Park once again, obviously the track that I made my debut at. And this was a very interesting one because I didn't do testing the day before. So I jumped straight into qualifying on the Saturday. I was terrible. I nearly spun first lap into turn one. I nearly crashed the car. And also I did finally eventually spin coming out the chicane. So it wasn't a good qualifying whatsoever. But in the race, I don't understand what happened in race one, because suddenly I just found all this pace and it all came together after a little bit of coaching with Steve. And I managed to just absolutely send it and go from P19 to P12. So yeah, no clue how I managed to do that. And actually this was one of the best overtakes here. He actually gets a massive tank slapper midway through the corner, and because of it I decide to go around the outside of him here, all the way up the line, keeping it in third, just redline it. He pushes me a little bit into the barrier, but I managed to just pip him on the line and make the move stick up to P12. It was an incredible race, that one, and I was very happy with it. Next was race 2, and race 2 was a little bit more average. Still moved up, and I managed to finish in P10. Next round was a little bit of a distance away because I decided to actually do a Focus Cup race, and that was incredible. It's a massive difference to the MX-5s and the petrols I had driven before, because this car was actually a diesel. For example, you had to kind of short shift a little bit. You couldn't really let it go over 5,200 revs, because if it did, then it went into limp mode. And when it went into limp mode, you would basically lose all time and all positions that you had had. So I actually ended up losing all the positions because I went into limp mode in race 1, which was a massive shame. I tried to claw back, and I actually managed to claw back to P3. Unfortunately, I started overdriving the car and actually overheated the tyres a little bit and started track exceeding massively, and I actually did get a 5-second penalty. So yeah, I did get a 5-second penalty, and so I actually ended up finishing P5 in class, and I think it was P12 or something altogether. Fortunately for me, I didn't have to wait that long to get that podium, because it was reverse grid for starting grid the next race, and I was starting P6. I managed to finish P5 altogether, but P2 in class, which I was very happy with, bearing in mind it actually did go into limp mode again once the safety car actually came in. So I was very happy and very fortunate that that didn't affect my race really, and only one person got past me. It's a massive shame though, because if it wasn't for limp mode, I possibly could have finished P1 in class, because I was chasing down the guy in first and I was right behind him, battling him. But nevertheless, P2 in class, my first ever podium in car racing, and I was very happy with it. So the next round was back in the MX5 with Misty Racing once again, and this one was at Brands Hatch Indy Circuit, and I've always loved Brands Hatch. I always remember playing it on the F1 game on the 2013 version where you have the classic cars and classic tracks. I always did 100% races around Brands Hatch. Absolutely loved the track, so to get to racing it in real life was a massive dream come true, to be honest. Even though it was only in an MX5, it was still a dream come true, and I was really excited for this one. Unfortunately, it didn't quite go the way we wanted. So in qualifying, it was absolutely hammering it down. As you can see from some of the footage, it was hammering it down. I could barely see anything, and yeah, it was a massive, massive learning experience. Nevertheless, though, we did actually manage to start P60 on the grid out of like 34. So I was about mid-pack, which I was very happy with. In race 1, I managed to do even better. I actually clawed myself up to P10. Unfortunately, there was a massive crash and a red flag. And on the restart, starting from P10, I did actually end up getting knocked off into the hairpin and actually spun around. So we did actually finish, I think it was P21, which was a massive shame to say the least. Bearing in mind I was in the top 10 once again. So yeah, in race 2 then, I really wanted to try and get vengeance and really trying to get back up the pack and get into that top 10 once again. I managed to do that, and this time it was dry race, so I was very happy with that, and I actually managed to get up to P14, and I was actually battling my teammate, who was actually the owner of the team as well in Misty Racing, Steve, and we actually ended up battling for a couple of laps before I tried a bit of a rash move around the outside of Paddock Bend, clipped the rear of him, he spun off into the gravel, got stuck. I managed to just carry on. One of the bonnet clips did pop off on my car, so the bonnet was flapping around a little bit. Yeah, that was not a good race whatsoever. Massive regret for that, to be honest. Massive apologies to Steve Steele, even for now. I don't really know what I was thinking. I think it was just a bit of inexperience and a bit of, obviously, anger trying to get back up to the top 10 after race 1's incident. But nevertheless, obviously, you have good races, you have bad races, and that just happened to be a bad race. I mean, I still finished P13, so it still wasn't really bad, but the fact that I took out my teammate in the process, it wasn't a good experience, to say the least. That was my final time racing in a race up to date. At the end of 2024, I was fortunate enough to test a Ginetta G56 GTA car around Silverstone National Circuit, and that was an incredible experience, to say the least, with a coach as well called Owen. He was an incredible coach. And other than that though, that was pretty much the last time I was in a race car. In 2025, as we all know if you've been following this channel for a while, I did lose the budget, so I didn't really have an opportunity to get in a race car. So yeah, it was an unfortunate year at the moment, but we're still pushing, we're still doing test days here and there, and still trying to work hard behind the scenes to try and get back in a car for maybe at the beginning of next year. But yeah, that is my racing career up to date explained. It has been a very up and down sort of career, and I'm still pushing to try and get those results and trying to get in a car again for next year. But nevertheless, I'll leave this video here. If you guys enjoy this video, then make sure to like and subscribe. But thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.